This video is about solving quadratic equations, and we'll call this one part 1. In this section we'll look at solving quadratic equation using the G.C.F method and also difference of squares. But let's get started with the G.C.F. Now G.C.F means greatest common factor. So you will look at the equation, and it's an equation because it is equal to something. Okay, once there's an equal sign, that's an equation. Alright, so we look at the equation and we check to see what is common among all the terms. This is one term, this is another term, this is another term. Okay, so we have x squared plus 2x. So x is common. So whatever is common, you'll factor that out. So we factor an x out. Then we have our parentheses. We're going to use this x to divide each term to tell what should be inside the parentheses. So x squared divided by x. Remember, x squared means x times x. So this x will cancel one of the x, leaving just x there. Okay? So x squared divided by x goes x times. Plus 2x divided by x, the x will cancel each other, leaving just the 2. Equals 0. So this is one of your factor, this is another factor. So you will equate each factor to 0. Okay? So what it means that x, which is this factor, equals 0. This is one of your solutions. Okay? And another solution would be when you equate this thing inside the parentheses to 0 and solve. So it would also be x plus 2, which is this inside the parentheses, equal to 0. And of course, to solve this equation, you will subtract 2 from both sides. Okay? So x equals -2. And this is your other solution. Okay, so that's how you solve quadratic equations using the G.C.F method. Let's do another one for practice. So here, our second equation, we have 4x squared minus 12x equals 0. Again, you're looking for all the things that are common. For sure, we can get a 4 out of 4, and we can get a 4 from 12. So 4 is common. We have x squared here and we have an x here. X is also common. So our greatest common factor is really 4x. Then we have our parentheses. So 4x squared divided by 4x, the 4's will cancel each other. This x will cancel one x from the x squared, leaving just x. Okay? And then positive divided by negative, negative divided by positive is negative. 12 divided by 4, that is 3, and the x's will cancel each other, so that is just 3 equal 0. Okay, now again, this is one of your factor and this is another factor, so you will equate each factor to 0 and solve. So our first factor is 4x, we'll equate that to 0, and of course if we solve this thing, we divide both sides by 4, so x equal to 0. This is one of your solutions. Okay, your other solution, you will equate what is inside the parentheses. And what is inside the parentheses is x minus 3, and that will equal to 0 as well. So in solving that, you will add 3 to both sides. Okay, that part cancels, and so x equals 3. And this is your other solution. So these are your two solutions for this question. These are your two solutions for this question. Okay? Alright. Now we're going to move into the other concept, which is difference of squares. Okay? So difference of squares, it is of the form a squared minus b squared. This is the general form of it. What it means, it must be a squared term minus another squared term. Another name for minus is difference, and that is why it is called difference of squares. Okay, so you're taking the difference of two squares. Okay, now once you recognize that your first term is a squared term and your second term is a squared term, and you're subtracting both terms, then that's a difference of squares. So what you will do is have two sets of parentheses. No sign should be between the parentheses. They should be multiplying each other. Okay, equal to 0. Then you will take the square root of each term. So the square root of x squared, that is x. And because the x is at the front, its square root will also be at the front in the parentheses. Okay? So the square root of x squared, that is x, one of the x comes here, the other one comes there. Okay? Now remember that only a positive times a negative can give you a negative. Or a negative times a positive can give you a negative. Or a positive divided by a negative, or a negative divided by a positive can give you a negative. Okay? So in this case, because we're multiplying, then it means that one of these sign, in one parenthesis you must have a plus, in the other you must have a minus. It doesn't matter if the minus is at the front and the plus is at the back or in the second parenthesis. It does not matter. Okay? Alright, then we will take the square root of the other term. The square root of 1 is just 1. So 1 comes here, 1 comes here. So this is one of your factor, this is your other factor. Now again, you will equate each factor to 0 and solve. So what you will have is x plus 1, which is one of your factor, equal to 0. And then your other one, your other factor, that would be x minus 1, and you equate that to 0 and solve. So in solving this, we would subtract 1 from both sides. So x would equal negative 1. So this is one solution here. Now in doing the other part here, you would add 1 to both sides. So x would equal to positive 1. And these would be your two solutions for this question. Okay? Let's look at another one for practice sake. This one here, if we look at it, we realize that 4 is a squared number. Squared numbers are 1, 4, 9. Because 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 4 is 16. So 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, that kind of thing. Those are squared numbers. Okay? Alright, so 4 is a squared number, y squared is a squared term, so this entire first term is a squared term. 25 is a squared number, and we're taking the difference of both terms, so that's difference of squares. So we will have our sets of parentheses, and we equate that to 0. The square root of 4 is 2, so because the 4 is at the front, the 2 comes at the front here as well. The square root of y squared is y, so the y comes here, the y comes here. So in other words, the square root of y squared is 2y. So one of the 2y comes here, the other one comes here. Again, remember, one parenthesis must be minus, the other must be plus, because only minus times positive will give you a negative, okay? And the square root of 25 is 5. One comes here, one comes here. So this is one factor, and in the second parenthesis is another factor. So in getting the solution, we would equate each factor to 0 and solve. So this is 2y minus 5 equals 0, and 2y plus 5 equals 0. Okay? And to solve this one here, we would add 5 to both sides. And for this one here, we would subtract 5 from both sides. Okay? So that would cancel there, that would cancel here. So what we would have is 2y equals positive 5 here, and we would have 2y equals negative 5 here. Okay? Alright. So now we would divide both sides by 2 in both cases. Divide both sides by 2 in both cases. So this 2 would cancel, that 2 would cancel. It means that y would equal to 5 halves, which is one of your solutions, and y would equal negative 5 halves, which is your other solution. And of course, you could convert these in decimal form if you want. Okay. Now let's look at when we have a mixture of both G.C.F. method and difference of squares. So in our first example, we realize that 8 is not a squared term. X cubed is not a squared term. 32 is not a squared term, and x is not a squared term. But we also realize that 8 is common to itself and 32. So we could factor out an 8. We also realize that x is common to itself, and it's also common to x cubed. So we could factor an x out. So in other words, our greatest common factor for this question is 8x. Now we have our parentheses. So 8x cubed divided by 8x, the 8 would cancel each other. This x would cancel 1 from the x cubed, leaving just x squared. Negative 32 divided by 8, that is negative 4. and the x would cancel each other, so we just have negative 4 there equal to 0. Okay? But if you look inside the parentheses, we realize that x squared is a squared term, and 4 is also a squared number, and we're taking the difference of both, so that is difference of squares inside the parentheses. So this is one factor. So we'll write our factor there, 8x, but inside this now, it's a difference of square situation. So the square root of x square is x. 1 comes here, 1 comes here because that is at the front. Of course, 1 must be plus, 1 must be minus. And the square root of 4 is 2. 1 comes here, 1 comes here. So these are your three factors. 8x, x plus 2, x minus 2. Okay? So you're going to equate each factor to 0 now and solve. So it would be 8x equal to 0. So this factor equal to 0. And if we solve that, we divide both sides by 8. So x equal to 0. This is one solution. Your other solution, you're going to equate this factor to 0. So that would be x plus 2, and you're equating it to 0. And then we would subtract 2 from both sides. So x would equal negative 2. This is your other solution. And then your final solution, you will equate the other factor, which is x minus 2, to 0. So that would be x minus 2 equals 0. Then you add 2 to both sides. So x would equal positive 2. Okay? And these would be your three solutions here. Okay? Let's look at our final example. Now again, this one, if you look at it, 2 is not a squared number. M squared is a squared term. 50 is also not a squared number. But 2 is common to itself and is common to 50. So we could factor out a 2. That is our greatest common factor. Then we have our parentheses. So 2m squared divided by 2. The 2's will cancel each other, leaving m squared. Okay? Negative 50 divided by 2, that is negative 25, equals 0. And if you look inside the parentheses, you see that m squared, that's a squared term, and 25 is a squared number, and we're taking the difference of both, so that is difference of squares. Okay? So these would be your factors. So we have a 2 here, then we'll have our two sets of parentheses, and that's equal to 0. The square root of m squared, that is m, so m comes here, and it comes here as well. Of course, one will be plus, one will be minus. The square root of 25, that is 5, one comes here, one comes here. Okay? So you will equate each factor to 0 and solve. So this would be 2 equals 0. So this one, you would not use this one here, okay? Because you haven't found a value for m. And then the other one here is m plus 5 equals 0. We would subtract 5 from both sides. So m equals negative 5. So in this case, there is no solution here. One solution here is negative 5. The other solution is m minus 5, which is your other factor. You equate that to 0, and you add 5 to both sides. Okay? So m equals 5. Alright. So these are your three. This is no solution. This is one of the solution, m equals negative 5, and the other solution is m equals 5. Okay? I hope you have learned more about solving quadratic equation. Stay tuned for part 2. Have a fantastic day.